Today we're walking through 7 NFL stories that most fans have never heard of. Some of them are funny, some of them are sad, and some of them are just plain bizarre. But they all have one thing in common, and that's that they sound completely made up, but not a single one of them is. And we start our journey with the NFL team who sold dogs. Walter Lingo ran Ourang dog kennels in the extremely small town of LaRue, Ohio, where he bred Airedale Terriers and sold them by mail order for about $150 a piece. Walter had been a marketing guy for his entire life, and he saw something that almost nobody else in the country saw. He saw that an NFL franchise was basically a traveling advertisement. The league played games across the country, drew newspaper coverage in every city, and at the time, the cost of a franchise was $100, which of course was less than the price of one of his dogs. In his mind, buying a team was a no-brainer because the investment would pay for itself if acquiring a team meant that he could sell one extra dog per game. So in the summer of 1922, Lingo walked into the NFL's Canton meeting, paid his $100, and bought himself a franchise. He named the team the Ourang Indians, and he wanted the team to be entirely Native American. This was an idea that Lingo had hatched the year before on a hunting trip in LaRue with 2 Native football players who would become friends of his at the kennel, and he visualized a roster of elite Native athletes drawing newspaper coverage in every city so that he could market them under the romantic ad copy about a supernatural bond between his Airedales and the Native Americans. By the summer of 1922, the concept was already in place, and his next move was hiring the Native American legend Jim Thorpe. Thorpe at this point was 35 years old and a decade past his 1912 Olympic gold medals, but he was still one of the most famous athletes in America. Lingo paid him $500 per week, which was a fortune in 1922 NFL terms, to be both player and coach and help manage the kennels. From there, Thorpe assembled an entirely Native American roster, and most of the roster came out of the Carlisle Indian Industrial School in Pennsylvania, which had run the most innovative college football program in the country a decade earlier under Pop Warner before closing in 1918. In Lingo's mind, everything that was happening was great, but the football itself was almost beside the point, because the halftime show was where the actual dog marketing happened and where he was actually going to make his money. During halftime, Lingo's Airedales did shooting and retrieving exhibitions, players performed native dances, there were tomahawk and knife throwing events, and there was even bear wrestling. His theatrics at halftime were unheard of, and some football historians would later credit Lingo with being the father of the modern halftime show. As for how the Ourang Indians did in actual games, it did not go well at all. They went 3-6 in their first year and 1-10 in the second, which included a brutal loss to the Akron Pros with a final score of 62-0, which remains the only NFL game to end with that score even to this day. By the time the team folded after the 1923 season, Lingo had given his kennel 2 years of national publicity, and according to his own family, the kennel was shipping about 100 dogs a day at its peak. The football team was a disaster on the field, but as an advertisement, it worked exactly the way Lingo wanted it to. He even went on to write about it in his own house magazine and called the whole operation his, quote, big publicity stunt, which confirmed that the Ourang Indians were and still are the only NFL franchise in history whose main purpose was literally to sell dogs. Bert Bell's death. Before Bert Bell was the commissioner of the NFL, he was the Philadelphia football lifer who had his hands in basically every part of the sport in the state. Bell co-founded the Philadelphia Eagles in 1933 and eventually became sole owner in 1936 when he bought out the team at public auction for $4,500. After leaving the Eagles, Bell became part owner of the Steelers with Art Rooney during the war years before selling his Steelers shares when the league elected him commissioner in 1946. Bell was tied to both Pennsylvania franchises in one way or another for almost his entire adult life. And one of the things that was most unique about Bell as commissioner was how much he valued being an everyday fan of football. Every team in the league reserved complimentary box seats for him at their home games, and Bell refused to ever use them. He made it a point to always buy his own tickets. During games, he'd wander the stadium, mingling with people in the stands, and treating the whole thing like he was just another football lover who paid to be there. However, his love of the game would be put in jeopardy in February of 1959 when he suffered a heart attack, and his doctor told him that in order to protect his heart, he needed to stay away from games entirely. Bell's response to his doctor's warning became famous when he said, "I'd rather die watching football than in my bed with my boots off." On Sunday, October 11th of that same year, Bell put on his suit and headed to Franklin Field, which was the University of Pennsylvania stadium and also his alma mater, for the Eagles' home game against the Steelers. He sat in the south end zone stands with regular fans like he always did, and before kickoff, he gave his 21-year-old son, Upton, some extra spending money and told him, "See you after the game." And those would sadly be the last words that he ever said to his son. With about 2 minutes left in the fourth quarter, the Eagles' Tommy McDonald scored the go-ahead touchdown to put Philadelphia up 28-24. The crowd around the play was on its feet, and in that south end zone during the commotion, Bert Bell collapsed. Bell was rushed to the hospital 2 blocks away, where he was pronounced dead at just 64 years of age. The commissioner who had co-founded the Eagles and once owned a piece of the Steelers died watching them play each other on the field of his alma mater at the exact moment the team he founded took the lead. And while the story of his death is obviously tragic, his son Upton later said that his father probably went the exact way that he would have wanted to go. The Chargers' secret steroid ranch. In 1963, Chargers head coach Sid Gilman moved the team's training camp to Rough Acres Ranch, which was a failed dude ranch, about 70 miles east of San Diego in Boulevard, California. Daily temperatures there would hit close to 100 degrees. Players slept 2 to a room in wooden shacks with no air conditioning, and the field they practiced on was so barren that the surface had to be covered in sawdust. Oh, and I can't forget that the field was also infested with rattlesnakes. Gilman had hired a strength coach from LSU named Alvin Roy, who had trained the U.S. Olympic weightlifting team in 1952, and Gilman's plan was to bring Alvin and his team to Rough Acres in order to get them into peak physical condition for the upcoming season. On day 1 of camp, Alvin Roy held up a bottle of little pink pills and told the players that he learned a secret from the Russians at the Olympics. He told the players that these magical pills were supposed to help with protein assimilation, but what the players didn't know was that those pills were actually Dianabol, which was an anabolic steroid. Now, before you say that the Chargers were cheating, it's important to keep in mind that steroids were completely legal in 1963. The pills got handed out in cereal bowls at every meal, and players were supposed to take 5 milligrams 3 times a day for the first 4 or 5 weeks of training camp. This new ritual was mandatory, and refusing the pills came with a $60 fine. About 95% of the Chargers roster complied. However, skilled players like wide receiver Lance Allworth and quarterback John Hadle would end up declining. But the linemen took them religiously, and according to Hadle, they started looking like Popeye a month later. The program would end up falling apart internally when tight end Dave Kasarik went to his personal doctor about an injury and mentioned the pink pills. The doctor showed him the package insert, which warned in big red letters that the drug could cause permanent bone damage, liver damage, heart damage, and testicular shrinkage. After getting this information from his doctor, Kasarik brought it to the team's all-pro tackle, Ron Mix, who took it to Gilman in a team meeting. Gilman's response on the record was, "What do these guys know? They don't know anything about football. They're doctors." However, even with the pushback, after a little more pressuring from Mix, the program was made voluntary. The 1963 Chargers would go on to obliterate the Patriots 51-10 in the AFL Championship game on January 5th of 1964, making it the only Major League championship that the Chargers franchise has ever won. The story of the secret ranch stayed mostly buried in mainstream football lore for decades before ESPN's TJ Quinn brought it back into the spotlight in a 2009 Outside the Lines investigation. By then, 10 of the 38 players on that 1963 roster had died at an average age of 53. It's obviously impossible to say now if the steroids contributed to the early deaths of those players, and we'll likely never truly know. Before we get to the rest of the video, here's a quick word from today's sponsor. When I was a kid, I would save up every dollar that I had and then beg my mom to take me to the store so I could blow every single cent of it on football cards. It never mattered if it was a good or a bad pack. There was just nothing that could beat that feeling. And luckily for me, Arena Club has brought that feeling back to me as an adult. Well, sort of an adult. They're a digital card platform where every card that you rip is attached to a real graded card. You can buy a slab pack on their website for as little as $25, and every pack tells you the pull rates up front, so there's absolutely no mystery. From there, you just click rip and a real graded card shows up on your screen, just like this pretty sick Jackson Dart card that I pulled earlier today. If you don't love the card that you got, Arena Club will instantly offer you cash for it based on fair market value, so you can keep it, flex it in your showroom, auction it off, or take the money. Right now, you can get 20% off of your first slab pack or first card purchase by going to arenaclub.com/Troybert or by using code Troybert at checkout. The links will be in my description. Now back to the video. The player known for setting himself on fire. Tim Rosevich was a fantastic football player who in 1967 co-captained John McKay's USC Trojans to a national championship. From there, the Philadelphia Eagles would take him with the 14th overall pick in the 1968 NFL Draft, and by his second season, he was a Pro Bowl linebacker. But his on-the-field play isn't why he's a folklore hero. His Eagles teammate Ron Medved would constantly say, "Whatever you heard about Tim, believe it." And Medved said that because Rosevich was known as the man who would eat glass off of the locker room table, swallow lit cigarettes mid-conversation, and the party trick that he was most known for was setting himself on fire at parties as a recurring joke. And as much as that sounds like it has to be an exaggeration, I promise you, it's not. According to the Philadelphia Inquirer, Rosevich would walk into a room engulfed in flames, get smothered out by his teammates, and then look around at panicked guests and say, "Sorry, I'm at the wrong apartment." Due to his reputation as the man who would set himself on fire for fun, in 1971, Sports Illustrated wanted to put him on the cover with the title, "He's Burning to Be a Success." And they, of course, wanted the cover photo to be Tim literally on fire. The Eagles refused to lend a uniform for the photo shoot, so SI photographer Tony Triolo went out and bought a generic green football jersey and lit him on fire in that instead. Rosevich's only complaint afterward was that the camera was too far away to capture the expressions on the faces of the people watching. When his football career ended, Rosevich pivoted to Hollywood, and fittingly, he broke into doing stunt work on Burt Reynolds' Hooper in 1978, and the next year, he was cast opposite of Barbra Streisand and Ryan O'Neal in the main event, where he played a boxer named Cannibal. From there, he stacked up more roles across The A-Team, Knight Rider, and MacGyver, and he had a recurring run on Magnum P.I. that came courtesy of his old USC college roommate, Tom Selleck. If anyone's ever told you that setting yourself on fire is a bad idea, they'd be right, except for in the case of Tim Rosevich, who made an entire career out of it. How one flag blinded Zeus. In a 1999 game between the Jaguars and Browns, referee Jeff Triplett threw a flag on a false start, and this would have been like any other flag, except this one flew directly into the face mask of Orlando Brown Sr., hitting him in his right eye. Now, I know a flag hitting you in the face sounds harmless, but you have to realize that at this time, flags were filled with metal BBs. After being hit in the eye, Brown screamed and went down, but when he got up, he started heading toward the sideline before turning around and walking back to confront Triplett. The man they called Zeus pointed to his own face, then delivered a two-handed shove to Triplett's chest that knocked him to the turf. Brown would be ejected for his retaliation toward the ref and suspended indefinitely shortly after. Meanwhile, in the aftermath of the flag, Brown was hospitalized for 6 days with bleeding behind his right eye. The league lifted the suspension a few months later once doctors realized the extent of the damage, and they saw that Brown was now facing a very real possibility that any further head contact could permanently take away what vision he had remaining in his injured eye. As a direct result of the injury, he failed Cleveland's physical the following summer and missed the next 3 full NFL seasons. Brown would go on to file a $200 million lawsuit against the NFL in 2001, and the league would ultimately settle for what was rumored to be somewhere between $15 and $25 million. The settlement did come with one caveat, and that was if Brown ever came back to play, the NFL would get half of his after-tax income each season, up to $1 million total. And that clause would actually come into play in 2003 when Brown decided to attempt an NFL comeback with the Baltimore Ravens. Brown would go on to play 3 seasons for the Ravens from 2003 to 2005, and in one game against the Raiders that first year back, he started at both offensive and defensive tackle in the same game. But a car accident in December of 2005 caused a back injury that would put him on IR, and the Ravens would release him a few months later. After that, he never played football again. Sadly, Orlando Brown passed away in September of 2011 at just 40 years old. The cause was due to complications from diabetes that the medical examiner concluded Brown likely didn't even know he had. He left behind his wife Myra and 4 kids. His legacy lives on through his son Orlando Brown Jr., who was drafted by the Baltimore Ravens in 2018 and now plays for the Cincinnati Bengals. After the incident, the NFL quietly changed how flags are weighted and how they're thrown. They've since swapped out metal BBs for beans or sand, and they now instruct officials to throw flags away from the play or just up in the air. The Steagles. When the United States entered World War II, the NFL almost didn't survive. Within 2 years, every team in the league was hemorrhaging players to military service, and by the start of the 1943 season, the situation in Pennsylvania had become impossible. The Pittsburgh Steelers had only 6 players left under contract, and the Philadelphia Eagles had only 16. Neither team could field a roster, and both franchises were quietly preparing to suspend operations until the war ended. So the league did something it had never done before, and they approved a temporary merger between the Eagles and Steelers by a vote of 5-4. The two teams would combine into one team for that 1943 season, and at the end of the year, they would unmerge and go back to being separate franchises. Officially, the team was called the Phil Pitt Combine, but a Pittsburgh sports writer named Chet Smith coined the nickname Steagles in June of that year, and it stuck. Both of the team's head coaches stayed on as co-coaches because Eagles head coach Greasy Neal and Steelers head coach Walt Kiesling absolutely hated each other, and neither would agree to be demoted by the other. So the league split the duties down the middle. Neal ran the offense, and Kiesling ran the defense, which actually ended up being one of the earliest examples of the modern offensive and defensive coordinator system that we have today. If the coaches fighting each other wasn't enough, the team itself was also a circus. The Steagles wore the Eagles green and white because the Philly side won that argument too, and the full roster was only 22 players, all of whom worked full-time jobs during the day. They had Tony Bova as a starting receiver. He was blind in one eye and partially blind in the other, which is the reason that he was classified as unfit for the military. The starting center, Ray Graves, was deaf in one ear. The starting left guard, Eddie Michaels, was nearly deaf. And the place kicker, Troy Smith, played with a prosthetic leg. And somehow, despite all of the chaos and dysfunction on this team, the Steagles finished that season 5-4-1, and that was the first winning season in the entire history of the Philadelphia Eagles, and only the second winning season in Steelers history. The team missed the playoffs by a hair, finishing third in the NFL Eastern Division. After the season, the NFL actually wanted the merger to continue with some adjustments, and Steelers owner Art Rooney also wanted to keep the team merged. However, the Eagles refused, by most accounts because Greasy Neal would have rather eaten his own playbook than stay another year working with Walt Kiesling. The Vikings Love Boat. Vikings cornerback Fred Smoot had one mission during the team's 2005 bye week, and that was to throw a party for the rookies that they would never, ever forget. Smartphones weren't a thing yet, and NFL teams throwing bye week parties wasn't uncommon. The odds of getting caught doing something stupid were significantly lower, if you were sneaky. And this Vikings team was not. Smoot and a couple of teammates went down to the docks on Lake Minnetonka the day before the party to tour boats, pick out menus, and discuss specialty liquor with the staff. They then signed the contract for 2 charter boats and put down a security deposit. With the boats and the drinks taken care of, it was time to figure out the guest list. Smoot considered himself an elite scout and recruiter, and he showcased his skills by flying in dozens of women from Atlanta, Miami, and a handful of other cities for the upcoming festivities. That night, about 90 people total, including roughly 17 Vikings, boarded the 2 houseboats at around 10 p.m. A bunch of NFL players around strippers, boats, and alcohol. What could possibly go wrong? The answer to that question would come relatively quickly, because before the boats had even left the dock, a Lake Minnetonka resident called 911 to report several Vikings for urinating in her front yard after climbing out of a big shuttle bus limousine. That was the first bad sign of many to come. Once they set sail, for about 40 minutes, the cruise was pretty routine. But then, the drinks started flowing, the strippers came out, and the party escalated quickly. The 2 boats had been staffed with a young crew, mostly wait staff in their early 20s, and within the hour, they found themselves stuck in the middle of a lake with a front row seat to things that they had not signed up to see. I won't go into extreme detail because YouTube wouldn't like that, but let's just say the kind of behavior that's supposed to stay behind closed doors was happening right out in the open, on both boats, and the partygoers weren't shy about trying to pull the crew into it. Waitresses said that they were repeatedly offered cash to stop serving drinks and start participating, and one of them later testified that the entire situation was, in her words, incredibly intimidating. The boat company's own attorney summed up the position the crew was in by asking people to picture a 300-pound NFL player offering a 90-pound waitress money to dance for him. After only about an hour into the cruise, both captains made the same call, and that was to turn their boats around and start heading back to the dock because they were genuinely afraid for the safety of their crews. When the cleaning crew came on board afterward, they found trash, underwear, and bodily fluids spread across both boats, and one crew member reportedly told reporters that they'd never seen anything like this before. The Hennepin County Sheriff's Office launched an investigation, and in December of 2005, 4 players were criminally charged. Dante Culpepper, Bryant McKinney, Fred Smoot, and Mo Williams each faced 3 misdemeanor counts of indecent conduct, disorderly conduct, and lewd conduct, with each count carrying a maximum penalty of a $1,000 fine and 90 days in jail. Culpepper's charges were eventually dismissed for insufficient probable cause. Mo Noah Williams was convicted only of disorderly conduct and fined $300. And in May of 2006, Smoot and McKinney both pled guilty and each got hit with a $1,000 fine and 48 hours of community service. The NFL would hand out their own discipline as well. The league fined Smoot and McKinney 1 game check each, but neither of them were suspended. Meanwhile, the Vikings' new owner, Ziggy Wilf, just 4 months into his ownership of the team, was trying to convince the Minnesota legislature to approve a new stadium bill, and he personally called the governor to apologize for the situation. Going into the bye week that year, the Vikings were 1-3, but they actually finished the season much better than they started at 9-7. So after it was all said and done, in some weird twisted way, the boat party didn't derail their season. The boat party captain, Fred Smoot, to this day says that he can neither confirm nor deny exactly what happened that night. But he did say, if you ever go onto that boat, do not shine a blacklight. That concludes our journey through NFL lore that's so insane, it sounds completely made up. If you happen to enjoy this video, you might also enjoy one of my other videos which I've put on screen here. And if you're feeling generous, a like or a subscription goes a long way. Let me know down in the comments if you learned something new or what your favorite story was. And as always, I will catch you all in the next one.